trapped by my husband in prison for 2 years because of his mistress. Watch how I got my revenge and turned them into homeless drifters on the very day of my release. The cell walls were damp, smelling of a mixture of old concrete, dried sweat, and rotting hope. Yet for Zariah, that wall was a giant calendar. With the tip of her thumbnail rough and slightly chipped, she traced a small vertical line near the leg of her iron cot. The line was almost invisible if you didn't look closely, but for Zariah, it was a tiny sign of victory. 729 days. Tomorrow would be day 730, the day of her release. Zariah took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the stale air of the women's correctional facility. She sat cross-legged on the thin mattress that had been her home for the last 2 years. Before this, she slept in a king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, in a luxurious villa in Silver Lake Estates, the most exclusive black neighborhood in the city. Before, she was the wife of Cyprian Mercer, an up-and-coming real estate mogul. Now, she was just inmate number 304. The memory washed over her like an unstoppable tide. The flashes of the reporters' cameras at the courthouse, the condescending look of the judge. And there on the witness stand, Cyprian, sitting with a crisp white shirt impeccably rolled up, his face tilted in perfectly feigned sorrow. "I loved my wife, Your Honor." Cyprian's voice had trembled then, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "But I cannot justify her actions. She pushed Azura out of jealousy. She killed our future child." Then there was Azura, Cyprian's personal assistant and mistress, sitting in a wheelchair. Her pale face, free of makeup, deliberately styled to look pitiful as she clutched her flat stomach. Crocodile tears rolled down her cheeks as she pointed a trembling finger at Zariah. Mrs. Vance screamed that I was a whore. Then she pushed me down the stairs. I felt the blood flowing. Lies. It was all a lie. That day, Zariah had indeed gone to Cyprian's office to demand an explanation for the infidelity she had discovered, but she never touched Azura. It was Azura who had hysterically stepped back and slipped, or perhaps threw herself on purpose, down the emergency stairwell, which was covered by only one security camera. The footage from that camera strangely became corrupted during the crucial minutes, leaving only the image of Zariah at the top of the stairs with an enraged face. 2 years. A felony conviction for aggravated assault resulting in the death of a fetus. When the judge's gavel struck, Zariah's world collapsed. She saw Cyprian hug Azura, comforting that viper. But in that embrace, Zariah caught a split second where Cyprian looked at her, not with guilt, but with a cold, calculating gaze. The look of someone who had just eliminated the only obstacle to a multi-million-dollar inheritance. "Zariah, you daydreaming again?" A raspy voice snapped her out of her trance. It was Ophelia, her cellmate, an older woman imprisoned for a pyramid scheme. Zariah turned with a neutral expression. During these 2 years, she had learned to shut off her emotions. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in this place. "Just counting, Ophelia," Zariah replied quietly. "Tomorrow you walk free. If I were you, I'd be thanking the Lord until I had a bump on my forehead." Ophelia laughed as she folded her inmate uniform. "But you're strange, Zari. You're too calm, like someone going grocery shopping, not someone walking out of hell." Zariah sketched a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Because the real hell isn't here, Ophelia. The real hell is out there waiting for me." Zariah stood up, smoothing her blanket. "And this time I'll be the one holding the fire." 10:00 a.m., visitation hours. The sound of the correctional officer's heavy boots echoed down the block's hallway. Normally, this was the time inmates anticipated the most. the hope of receiving a package from a relative, or simply seeing their children's faces. But for Zariah, this hour was a test of patience. "Zariah Vance, you have a visitor!" The officer, a burly woman, shouted from the other side of the bars. Zariah didn't move from her position, reading a book in the corner of the cell. She didn't even lift her head. "Who?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Who do you think? Your faithful husband and his young lady," the officer sneered. Despite her toughness, the woman felt a certain sympathy for Zariah. The whole prison knew how diligent Cyprian and Azura were with their visits. To an outsider, it looked like an act of responsibility and forgiveness, but the officers who often watched their interactions knew something didn't add up. "Tell them I'm sick, or dead, whatever," Zariah replied coldly, turning the page of her book. "Zari," whispered Ophelia, "it's the last month. Tomorrow, you leave. Why not see them one last time? Maybe they brought some money." Zariah slammed the book shut. "I don't need their money, Ophelia. Besides, they don't come to give. They come to take." The officer sighed. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Mercer says it's urgent. He says it's about your late parents' assets that are going to be seized if you don't sign today. He's brought a notary." Zariah laughed, a dry, cutting sound. "Tell the Honorable Mr. Mercer," Zariah said, staring intently at the officer, "that my hands are cramped. I haven't been able to hold a pen in 2 years because I've been too busy scrubbing inmates' laundry. If my father's assets are seized, so be it. Let it all burn." The officer shook her head, surrendering. "You are incredibly stubborn. All right. I'll tell him you refuse to see them again." When the officer left, Zariah leaned her back against the cold wall. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from contained rage. Every month, for 24 months, Cyprian and Azura had come. At first, they arrived with sweetness, bringing good food, pretending to want reconciliation. Cyprian claimed he was forced to press charges due to public pressure and Azura's family, but Zariah knew that a week after her imprisonment, Cyprian tried to liquidate a fixed-term deposit in Zariah's father's name worth $3 million. The bank refused because it needed Zariah's signature as the sole heir. From that moment on, their visits turned into psychological terror. Cyprian begged, then threatened. Azura cried, then mocked. They needed that signature. Cyprian's business empire, which looked magnificent, was actually rotting from the inside. His main capital had always come from fund injections from Zariah's father. Without Zariah, Cyprian was nothing more than the captain of a sinking ship. "Just wait," Zariah whispered to the void. "You won't have my signature, you'll have me." In the air-conditioned visitation room, Cyprian Mercer loosened his tie abruptly. Cold sweat beaded on his temples. "She refused again?" Cyprian asked, almost shouting, when the officer returned alone. The officer nodded indifferently. "She says her hands are cramped, sir. She can't sign." "That crazy woman!" Azura, sitting next to Cyprian, slammed her Hermes bag onto the table. "She's doing it on purpose. She knows the company audit starts tomorrow. If we can't liquidate her father's trust fund today to cover the hole in the balance sheet, we are finished." Cyprian massaged the bridge of his nose, which was throbbing. His face, usually handsome, now looked older than his 35 years. The last 2 years had been a logistical nightmare for him. He thought getting rid of Zariah would make things easier. Zariah was a homebody, submissive, or so he believed. He thought throwing her in prison would break her spirit, making her sign anything in exchange for early release or better conditions. but the Zariah in prison had turned into a rock. She refused sentence reductions, refused privileges, and worst of all, refused to yield power over the assets of her father, Reginald Vance. Even though Cyprian already controlled the operations of his father-in-law's company, without legal ownership of the shares, he couldn't leverage the vital assets to get new loans. "Calm down, Azura. Don't shout here," Cyprian hissed. "You asked me to calm down? Are you kidding me?" Azura glared at him, her beautiful face distorted by panic. "The developers of the Skyview project are already claiming the third payment. If we don't pay next week, the project halts, and the media will smell the carrion. Cyprian, and remember, tomorrow she walks free." Those words hung in the air like poison. Tomorrow she walks free. So, what if she walks free? Cyprian tried to sound confident, though his heart wavered. She's just an ex-con. Who's going to believe her? Her reputation is destroyed. The label of baby killer will haunt her forever. We'll pick her up tomorrow. We'll take her home, lock her up. We'll pump her full of sedatives until she signs. Are you sure? Azura looked at him doubtfully. She's been silent for 2 years, Cyprian. Her silence is scary. She's never made a scene. She's never begged. She simply refused. She has no one, Azura. Her father is dead. Her fortune is blocked. Her high society friends have abandoned her. She'll walk out of here destitute if we don't take her in. Cyprian struggled to convince himself. Cyprian stood up, adjusting his jacket. Let's go home. Let's prepare the script for tomorrow. Call the journalists. We'll create the narrative that we are a compassionate family welcoming back the wayward wife. That way, if she tries anything, the public will think she's ungrateful. Azura huffed but followed Cyprian. As they walked toward the black Cadillac awaiting them, they didn't realize that their seemingly perfect plan was hanging by a very thin thread about to snap. Night fell over the prison, bringing a chill that soaked into the bones. In the small library, rarely visited by other inmates, Zariah sat opposite an older woman with short white hair. It was Octavia Graves, a famous former attorney imprisoned 5 years ago, used as a scapegoat in a corruption case involving a high-ranking official. Octavia was Zariah's unofficial mentor inside. "Ready for tomorrow, child?" Octavia asked. Her voice was raspy but full of authority. Zariah nodded. "Mentally, I'm ready, Octavia. But what about the documents?" Octavia smiled mysteriously, reached into her pocket, and pulled out a small contraband USB drive. "My protege, Zaire, has everything secured on the outside," Octavia whispered. "He's brilliant, like I was in my youth. He tracked the flow of funds from Cyprian's company. Cyprian was careless. He used a shell company in Panama to launder money from the projects, but he put his mother's name as director. Amateur." Zariah's eyes shone with coldness. "And Azura's medical proof?" "Safe," Octavia replied. Zaire managed to get close to the nurse who attended to Azura. Turns out the nurse kept a copy of the original medical record that wasn't destroyed. Azura suffered a miscarriage 2 days before the stair incident due to an overdose of illegal diet pills. She was already bleeding when she left the house. Zariah clenched her fists under the table. The truth was painful, but also liberating. She had never killed anyone. The guilt that had tormented her in the first months vanished without a trace, replaced by the embers of a vengeance burning bright. "Thank you, Octavia. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Zariah's voice trembled. Octavia patted her hand. "Pay me by winning, Zariah. Win for all of us, the ones silenced by arrogant men and a corrupt system. When you walk out of here, you will no longer be the naive Zariah. You will be the CEO of your own life." Octavia leaned in. "Remember our strategy. Don't attack directly. Let them feel superior first. Let Cyprian think he still has control. When he lowers his guard, when he feels safe on his throne, then you pull the rug out from under his feet. First step, asset freeze, Zariah murmured, repeating the plan they had mapped out for months. Exactly, Octavia nodded. Based on your father's original will, the one you left in a safety deposit box at another bank, which luckily Cyprian didn't know about, you have absolute veto power. As soon as you get out and activate your status with the board of directors, every cent that leaves the company accounts will need your approval. Zariah imagined Cyprian's face when his credit card was declined. A faint smile returned to her lips. One more thing, Octavia added with a serious face. Be careful. Cyprian is cunning, but Azura is reckless. Desperate people do crazy things. I already died once. 2 years ago, Octavia, Zariah replied calmly. They can't kill someone who is already dead. On her last night, Zariah couldn't sleep. She spent it packing her few belongings, some books, a toothbrush, a change of clothes she wore when she came in, and a small crumpled photo of her father. She distributed the rest of her soap, shampoo, and some food among her cellmates. An emotional atmosphere enveloped cell number 12. Don't forget about us, huh, Zari? Said Ophelia, with teary eyes. I won't, Zariah promised. I'll come back. Not as an inmate, but as someone who will help with your case, Ophelia. At dawn, Zariah stood in front of the small cracked mirror above the sink. She contemplated her reflection. Her hair, once long and manicured, was now cut to shoulder length and somewhat coarse. Her skin wasn't as soft anymore. There was a hardness in her features. Her eyes, once soft and full of love, were now dark and deep, like the ocean on a stormy night. She was no longer the sweet Mrs. Mercer. She was no longer Reginald Vance's spoiled girl. Prison had stripped her of all her naivety and weakness, leaving an indestructible steel core. She touched her chest. Her heart beat steadily, without fear. There was only sharp focus. Outside these walls, Cyprian and Azura were probably sleeping peacefully on a plush mattress bought with Zariah's father's money. Or maybe they were nervous thinking about the audit. They didn't know a storm was heading their way. They thought the Zariah walking out tomorrow would be a broken, ashamed, and poor woman. They thought they were picking up a wounded sheep. How wrong they were. The cell door would open in a few hours. Zariah put on her old white shirt, the only decent garment she had. The shirt now fit somewhat loosely on her thinner frame. She buttoned it up to her neck as if putting on armor. Zariah sat on the edge of the bed waiting for the sound of the key turning. She whispered a promise to herself, a promise that would fuel every one of her steps from that moment on. Cyprian, Azura, enjoy your luxury breakfast this morning, because it will be the last decent meal you'll be able to swallow in peace. The metallic sound of the lock resonated. The cell door opened. The hallway light spilled inside. The game had begun. The morning sun shone brightly in the prison's outer courtyard, as if wanting to burn away the sins locked behind the concrete walls. However, the heat of the sun was outmatched by the heat of the camera spotlights. There was no longing or sadness, not even explosive anger. Her gaze was empty, but sharp as the barrel of a rifle about to fire. Cyprian swallowed hard. He took a step forward, extending his arms with a moved expression he had rehearsed in front of the mirror. "Zariah, darling, finally!" Cyprian said loudly so the microphones would catch it. "Welcome back. We are here for you." Azura stepped forward behind Cyprian, offering the flowers with a trembling hand. "Sis, we've prepared your room at home. Let's start over, okay?" The cameras flashed frantically, capturing the moment of reconciliation. Zariah stopped 2 steps away from them. She looked at the white roses as if looking at a dead rat. Then she looked at Cyprian. The corner of her lips lifted slightly, forming a crooked, chilling smile. She said nothing. She simply took a step to the side, walking right past Cyprian as if he were a lamppost on her path. "Zariah," Cyprian hissed, his voice turning sharp as he realized she was ignoring him. He grabbed her arm. "Don't make a scene. Get in the car now." The grip was strong, painful, but Zariah didn't wince. She looked at Cyprian's hand on her arm, then at his eyes. "Let go of me," Zariah said quietly. Her voice was raspy from disuse, but her coldness soaked right down to Cyprian's bones. "Or I scream in front of all these cameras that you are hurting me." Cyprian, surprised, let go of her arm by reflex. Zariah resumed her march, leaving Cyprian and Azura standing there with ridiculous expressions and empty hands in the middle of a crowd of journalists who began to whisper in confusion. "Where is she going? She has no one," Azura said, panic setting in. Her voice started to rise, breaking the image of the elegant woman she had built. Zariah kept walking toward the main road. Cyprian tried to follow her, but his steps were halted by the smooth roar of an engine approaching. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom pushed its way through the journalists. The car was ostentatiously luxurious, a stark contrast to the dust of the street in front of the prison. Its license plate wasn't just any plate. It indicated its owner had access and power. The car stopped right in front of Zariah. A uniformed chauffeur got out quickly to open the rear door for her, but it wasn't the chauffeur that left Cyprian slack-jawed. What froze him was the figure of a young man in an impeccable suit who stepped out of the passenger side and bowed respectfully to Zariah. Zaire Knox, the young Harvard-educated attorney, famous for winning impossible cases against giant corporations. Cyprian had tried to hire Zaire for his legal team last year, but was flatly rejected. What was Zaire doing here for Zariah? "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," Zaire greeted with a clear, respectful voice. "Following Ms. Graves' instructions, everything is ready." Zariah nodded briefly. "Let's go, Zaire." Before getting into the luxury vehicle, she turned one last time. She saw Cyprian with his face flushed red with anger and embarrassment, and Azura staring in disbelief. Zariah didn't wave. She simply got into the car, and the door closed with a solid, muffled thud, separating her world from theirs. The luxury car drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust that hit Cyprian's face. "Mr. Mercer! Mr. Mercer!" The journalists now surrounded Cyprian like sharks smelling blood. "Who picked up Mrs. Vance? Whose car is that? Is there a third person? Is the reconciliation canceled?" "No comment," barked Cyprian, losing control. He shoved a microphone away and pulled Azura's hand roughly. "Let's go." Inside his own luxury car, which now felt cramped and hot, Cyprian punched the steering wheel. "Who was the bastard who picked her up?" he shouted. "It's Zaire Knox, Cyprian." Azura's voice trembled with fear. "The expensive lawyer. Where did Zariah get the money to hire him? Her accounts are empty. We checked." "I don't know." Cyprian started the engine abruptly. "But wherever she goes, we have to find her. I need that signature today." Meanwhile, in the silent, cool Rolls-Royce, Zariah reclined her head on the soft leather seat. The scent of expensive leather and sandalwood air freshener replaced the rancid smell of the prison. "Where to, ma'am?" Zaire asked politely from the front seat, watching her in the rearview mirror. "To the sanctuary, Zaire," Zariah replied, eyes closed. "I want a shower. I want to scrub off the remains of their contact." The sanctuary turned out to be a penthouse on the top floor of a 5-star hotel in downtown. This property was one of the many hidden assets of Zariah's late father, not recorded in the company books Cyprian managed, but in a private trust fund that only Zariah could access upon turning 30 or under certain emergency conditions. Her unjust imprisonment had triggered the emergency clause. Zariah stood under the stream of hot water in the spacious marble bathroom. Steam filled the room. She scrubbed her skin with a rough sponge, as if wanting to tear off the layer of epidermis that had touched prison air, that had been touched by Cyprian. Finally, tears welled up, mixing with the water. It wasn't a cry of sadness, but of liberation. She wept for her 2 stolen years. She wept for her father, who couldn't see her free. She wept for the child she never carried in her womb, but whom she was accused of killing. After an hour, Zariah stepped out. On the king-sized bed was a selection of new clothes prepared by Zair's team. In her size. No longer the pastel, feminine dresses Cyprian liked, so Zariah would look like a submissive wife. The selection was bold, modern, and imposing. Structured blazers, high-waisted trousers, silk shirts in navy blue and black. The colors of power. Zariah chose a pristine white suit with an asymmetrical, elegant cut. White not as a symbol of purity, but as a blank canvas, or perhaps as the shroud for Cyprian's career. As she buttoned the jacket, Zair knocked on the door and entered with a thick stack of documents. "Excuse the interruption, ma'am. The notary is already waiting in the living room. We need your signature for the total transfer of powers regarding your father's holding company." Zariah sat at the vanity, allowing a professional stylist, also arranged by Zair, to cut her hair into a sharp bob that framed her determined features. "Read me the key points, Zair," Zariah ordered, gazing at her new reflection in the mirror. Point 1. Zair opened a blue folder. "The power of attorney you granted to Cyprian Mercer 3 years ago is revoked." Point 2. Your status as majority shareholder with 90% of the shares is activated. Point 3. All assets, both movable and immovable, in the name of the company or affiliated persons, are frozen for forensic audit. "Proceed," Zariah said succinctly. "There is one more thing, ma'am." Zair hesitated for a moment. "The bank has informed us that Mr. Mercer is requesting an emergency withdrawal of $1.2 million this very afternoon, using the deed to a property in Silver Lake Estates as collateral. The deed is in your name, but he possesses the old power of attorney." Zariah spun her chair to look at Zair. Her face, now with light but firm makeup, looked formidable. "Let him request it," Zariah said coldly. "Let him feel victorious until the very last second, then cut off his access right when he's about to swallow the hook." Zariah stood up, stepping into blood-red stilettos. The sound of her steps on the marble floor resonated like the strike of a judge's gavel. "I'm done being the victim, Zair. Now show them who the real owner of all the luxury they enjoy is." While Zariah plotted her war strategy, Cyprian was trying to bail water out of a sinking ship. At the headquarters of the Mercer Group, which ironically was located in a building owned by Zariah's father, Cyprian paced back and forth in the boardroom. In front of him, 3 main investors looked nervous after seeing the morning news. "Mr. Mercer," one of the investors cleared his throat, "the news this morning, your wife refused to come home with you. Will this affect the dispute over asset ownership? We heard the land for the Marbella project is still in her name." Cyprian laughed, a laugh too loud and forced. "Ah, Mr. Garrett, don't believe cheap gossip. My wife Zariah, well, 2 years in prison affected her mental health a bit. She was ashamed to face the media, so she left quietly in a car from the mental health clinic I hired. She needs time alone, so the assets are safe." "Safe 100%?" another investor insisted. 100%, Cyprian lied smoothly. "In fact, this very afternoon I'm signing the liquidation for fresh funds to accelerate our project. You have nothing to worry about. Zariah is an obedient wife. As soon as she calms down, she'll sign whatever I put in front of her." Azura entered the room with a tray of coffee, playing her role of efficient secretary again. She smiled sweetly at the investors, but her eyes betrayed panic when they met Cyprian's. When the investors left, appeased with promises, Azura smashed the tray against the table. "Are you crazy, Cyprian? Mental health clinic? What if the journalists investigate? We don't even know where she is." "Shut up, Azura," Cyprian barked. "I'm buying time. The bank just called. The verification for the $1.2 million withdrawal is in process. As soon as the money is in our account, we pay the suppliers, secure our position, and then we look for Zariah. If necessary, we'll hire some thugs to drag her home." Cyprian's phone pinged. A notification from the bank. Verification process in final phase. Cyprian sighed in relief. "See? The old power of attorney still works. Zariah is a fool. She didn't go straight to a notary upon leaving. She must be crying in some corner. "Tonight we have to celebrate, Cyprian," said Azura, starting to calm down. "To relax our nerves and to prove to the public we aren't worried. Let's dine at the Gilded Oak. Invite some friends from the club." "Good idea," Cyprian nodded, adjusting his tie. His confidence was slowly returning. He felt he still had control. He had always beaten weak Zaria. Why would this time be different? They didn't realize that across town, a courier was delivering a priority legal notice to that bank's headquarters. A notice with the letterhead of the law firm Knox & Associates, attaching a notarial deed signed just 5 minutes ago. The Gilded Oak restaurant buzzed that night with the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers shone warmly. Soft jazz floated in the atmosphere. Cyprian and Azura were seated at the best table in the center of the room. Azura wore a new evening gown she had bought that same afternoon. With the company credit card, of course. They were surrounded by 2 other couples, business partners they were trying to convince. "So it's true Zaria has mental problems?" asked Mrs. Sterling, a socialite fond of gossip. Azura put on a face of feigned sadness. "Yes, darling, it's a shame. This morning she didn't even recognize Cyprian. She was hallucinating. The doctor says she needs intensive treatment. We are very worried." "You are saints," praised Mrs. Sterling's husband. "Continuing to care for the woman who tried to kill your child." Cyprian smiled humbly, raising his wineglass. "Family is family, sir. I could never abandon Zaria. Let's toast to a better future." Glasses clinked. Cyprian felt victorious. The narrative had been controlled. The money would arrive tomorrow morning. Life was returning to normal. "Excuse me, sir." A waiter approached with a card machine in hand to charge for an extra bottle of Dom Perignon and the dinner bill. Cyprian pulled out his black platinum corporate card with a casual air. The card was linked directly to the main company account with an unlimited limit. "Go ahead," Cyprian said, without looking at the bill. The waiter inserted the card, waited a moment, then frowned. He tried again. "I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined," the waiter whispered politely. Laughter at the table ceased. Cyprian's face flushed red. "Impossible. Try again. Maybe your machine is broken." The waiter tried again. A long, painful beep sounded. "Still declined, sir. The reason is contact issuer." "Use mine." Azura quickly pulled out her credit card, a supplementary card from the same account. The result was the same. Declined. Cold sweat began to run down Cyprian's back. The guests started looking at each other uncomfortably. "Maybe there's a problem with the bank's system." Cyprian tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. "One moment, I'll call finance." Cyprian walked away from the table with trembling hands while dialing his CFO's number. "Hello, Mr. Reynolds. Why aren't the corporate cards working? Did you forget to pay the bill?" Cyprian barked in a whisper. On the other end of the line, Mr. Reynolds' voice sounded panicked and breathless. "Mr. Mercer, I was just about to call you. It's a disaster, sir. All company accounts have been frozen." "What do you mean frozen?" "An order just arrived from the SEC and the Federal Reserve. There is a total blocking instruction at the request of the new majority shareholder based on an asset embezzlement clause. And sir, the $1.2 million we requested this afternoon, the operation has been automatically canceled." Cyprian's world flipped upside down. "New majority shareholder? Who?" "Mrs. Zaria Vance, sir," replied Mr. Reynolds quietly. "Her notary just sent the active change in company structure. You were removed as CEO at 5:00 p.m. this afternoon. All your access has been revoked." Cyprian dropped the phone. He turned toward the large window of the restaurant. Across the street, a giant screen that normally showed cosmetic ads suddenly changed. It was breaking news. On the screen, Zaria's face, beautiful, firm and powerful, was giving a press conference at a podium. The volume of the TV at the restaurant bar was turned up by other customers. "I, Zaria Vance, as the legitimate owner of the Vance Group, announced today a total restructuring of management. We have found evidence of massive embezzlement of funds over the last 2 years. Starting today, I assume total control and will take legal action against the parties who have harmed the company. On the screen, Zariah looked directly into the camera as if looking directly into Cyprian's eyes, who stood paralyzed inside the luxury restaurant, unable to pay his bill. Every eye in the restaurant focused on Cyprian and Azura. The whispers of admiration for the saintly family transformed into looks of contempt and mockery. Cyprian felt his knees go weak. It wasn't just a declined credit card, it was checkmate. And Zariah had just moved her first pawn. The next morning, the city woke up with an explosion. Not of a bomb, but of information that destroyed a reputation in seconds. In her penthouse, Zariah enjoyed a cup of chamomile tea while looking at her tablet. Zaire sat across from her, smiling with satisfaction. Trending topic number 1 on X, Instagram, and TikTok, Zaire reported. The hashtags #Truth4Zariah and #MercerScandal have already reached 2 million mentions in an hour. Zariah swiped her finger across the screen. An anonymous account managed by Zaire's investigative team had published an explosive file. It wasn't mere rumors. It was a high-resolution scan of the original medical record from Mercy General Hospital, dated September 23rd, 2 days before the stair incident that sent Zariah to prison. The document read clearly, Patient Azura Banks. Diagnosis, spontaneous incomplete abortion due to consumption of dangerous chemical substances, dietary supplements. Procedure, emergency D&C, September 23rd, 11:45 p.m. The document proved that when Azura fell down the stairs on September 25th, her uterus was already empty. There was no baby that Zariah had killed. Only the drama of a manipulative woman who used her own miscarriage to get rid of the legitimate wife. Across town, in the luxury villa that used to belong to Zariah, the atmosphere was tense. Cyprian smashed his phone against the wall, shattering the screen. His breathing was ragged. His red-rimmed eyes stared at Azura, who was curled up on the sofa, her face pale as wax. "Explain it to me." Cyprian's voice was low, trembling with rage, about to explode. "Explain to me why that medical record says you miscarried 2 days before Zariah came to the office." It's fake, Cyprian. Zariah forged it." Azura tried to deny, but her voice cracked. "Don't lie to me anymore," Cyprian shouted, approaching and grabbing her by the shoulders. "I just called the hospital director. He's terrified. He says the file is authentic and was stolen by an intern nurse, so it's true.